There are maps that no longer exist. Maps said to have charted an ocean that once stretched across what we now call the Pacific. On those maps, between the fading outlines of Asia and the Americas, lay a vast continent named Mu. A place that, according to a handful of explorers and mystics, once gave birth to every civilization that followed. Egypt, Sumer, the Maya, even Atlantis. They claimed Mu was the mother world, the cradle of all human memory, swallowed by the sea long before history began to write itself. But how could an entire continent vanish without a trace? How could myths that emerged independently on opposite sides of the world all speak of the same cataclysm, the same sunken kingdom, the same luminous beings descending from the stars? From the tablets of Uxmal to the chants of Polynesian priests, from Colonel James Churchward's lost Naacal records to the echoing stones of Nan Madol, every clue feels like a whisper from a forgotten epoch. Perhaps what we call civilization is not a beginning, but a return. Perhaps beneath the myths lies an inheritance too old to remember, yet too familiar to dismiss. Welcome to Historic Sleep. If you're drawn to stories like these, the ones that live in the shadows between what we see and what was made to disappear, feel free to like and subscribe only if it feels right, and let me know in the comments where are you watching from and what time is it for you right now. I love seeing our little map of watchers light up around the world. The story of Mu begins, as all forgotten things do, with absence. No ruins can be found, no inscriptions remain, only scattered fragments, whispers, and inexplicable alignments carved into stone continents apart. And yet, from this silence, an entire civilization seems to rise, shaped not by what we know, but by what we feel to have been lost. It was in the late 19th century when a British officer named James Churchward, stationed in India, claimed to have seen ancient clay tablets written in a language he called Naacal, a script, he said, older than Sumerian, older even than the idea of writing itself. From these fragments, he pieced together a vision of a sunken world, a vast Pacific continent that once held 60 million souls and a wisdom inherited, perhaps, from beings not born of earth. Churchward described temples made of seamless stone, gardens illuminated by unknown energies, and a priestly order that spoke with the stars. He insisted that Mu was the birthplace of humanity, and that after its destruction by a chain of cataclysms, its survivors scattered to build new civilizations. The Egyptians, the Mayans, the Sumerians, all carrying the same symbols of the sun, the serpent, and the feathered crown. To some, his writings were delusion, to others, revelation. But either way, his words reopened a question humanity thought it had settled. Where did we really come from? It is a strange thought, that beneath the calm Pacific, beneath the shifting tectonic plates and the weight of geological time, there might lie the bones of an age so ancient it predates myth. Modern science dismisses the idea of Mu as pseudo-history, a fantasy born from colonial imagination and misplaced zeal. Yet even now, the ocean floor holds secrets no sonar has fully mapped. Volcanic ridges stretch like the spines of drowned mountains. Submerged plateaus such as the Ontong Java and Easter Island rise mirror, in eerie geometry, the fragments of an obliterated landmass. And scattered across the Pacific, the remnants of megalithic sites, Nan Madol, Pohnpei, and the Moai of Rapa Nui, bear the same inexplicable precision, the same astronomical intent as structures half a world away. How could such congruence arise among peoples separated by oceans, millennia, and isolation? Some anthropologists argue for cultural diffusion, that ancient mariners crossed the seas, spreading stories and symbols. But Churchward's theory reached deeper. He proposed that those seafarers were not merely explorers. They were refugees, survivors of Mu's final collapse. And the knowledge they carried, he wrote, was not born of human trial and error, but of inheritance, technology and wisdom passed down from beings who came from beyond the morning star. To believe him is to reopen a wound in the story of human evolution. For if Mu existed, then the rise of civilization was not an accident of geography or adaptation, but an echo, a recollection of something older. The feathered gods of Mesoamerica, the shining children of the sun in Andean myth, the people from the sky of Polynesian chants, all might be distorted memories of those who guided the last survivors through the dark waters of renewal. Even in the ancient texts of Asia, one finds echoes. In the Tamil traditions of Kumarikandam, a lost southern continent, in the Japanese legends of Horai, the floating isle of immortals. Each describes a paradise destroyed by water and a migration of enlightened beings who carried fragments of divine knowledge to the world that remained. Perhaps coincidence explains it. Perhaps human minds, across time and isolation, invent similar stories to give meaning to loss. But perhaps those parallels exist because they are reflections of a single event, fractured through language and distance, like light passing through water, bending into many colors yet coming from one source. When explorers reached Easter Island, they found an oral tradition that spoke of a homeland called Hiva, a land swallowed by the sea, whose people fled east in canoes. In Central America, the Quiche Maya told of a dawn world that perished when the sky fell and the sea rose. The Hopi of North America spoke of previous worlds destroyed by fire and flood, each time reborn by the few who remembered how to live in harmony with the stars. These are not the inventions of a single culture. They are the memories of catastrophe, etched into myth, surviving like fossils of the mind. Geologists might argue, the Pacific Basin is not shaped like a collapsed continent. It is an oceanic crust, ancient and stable. Yet even so, new evidence occasionally disturbs certainty. Underwater terraces near Yonaguni, Japan, appear to be carved steps, their edges too sharp, their symmetry too deliberate. Mainstream archaeology calls them natural formations, but viewed through the lens of possibility, they resemble something older, foundations left by hands long forgotten. On the seafloor near Tonga and Micronesia, sonar scans reveal vast rectilinear patterns buried under silt. Could these be remnants of volcanic uplift, or the faint scars of a civilization erased before we learned to write? Perhaps the truth lies somewhere in between, a geological event transformed into myth, a memory of disaster passed through generations until it became legend. But if legend alone cannot create identical symbols across oceans, what force could? What thread connects the solar disks of Egypt to the radiant suns of Polynesia, the serpent guardians of Mesoamerica to the Naga of India, the 7 stars worshipped by Mu's supposed descendants, and the 7 sisters of the Pleiades, said to be home of the gods? Every culture carries within it a memory of descent, from the heavens, the sea, or the stars. The Dogon of Mali speak of Nomo, amphibious beings who came from Sirius. The Maori of Aotearoa remember ancestors descending on shining canoes from the sky. In the Andes, Viracocha emerges from the waters to shape humankind, and Churchward, standing in his London study, believed he had rediscovered the origin of these myths. A lost motherland where gods and humans once lived side by side. But was he uncovering truth or dreaming one into being? The Naacal tablets he described were never found again. No museum, no archive, no witness has verified them. And yet his story refuses to die. It persists because it fulfills a need, the yearning to belong not to one corner of Earth, but to a lineage that spans the stars. The story of Mu is not only about a land that drowned, it is about the memory of unity, the ache for an origin that transcends history. When the tides of time rise high enough, truth and myth become indistinguishable. All that remains is the faint pulse of a question, beating beneath the surface of our knowledge. What if civilization did not begin in the fertile valleys of Mesopotamia, but in a place the sea reclaimed, leaving behind only dreams and the quiet hum of something we once were? In that question lies the essence of Mu, not a continent of stone, but a continent of memory, submerged within us all. If the myth of Mu truly hides beneath the sediment of memory, then its outline is faint but insistent, an afterimage pressed upon the collective mind of humanity. In the early 20th century, as Churchward's theories rippled through occult circles and fringe archaeology, others began searching for proof in the language of symbols. They noticed something uncanny. Ancient civilizations across the globe shared not just motifs, but proportions, cosmologies, and architectural ratios that seemed to obey the same hidden geometry. It was as though they were all recalling a code, one that predated them, passed down like an echo through time. On temple walls in Egypt, the lotus and the solar disk mirror motifs in the temples of Angkor. The spiral found in Celtic stone carvings repeats in Maori tattoos and in the megaliths of Newgrange. Even more strangely, the pyramid, an emblem of power and initiation, appears across continents that, by conventional timelines, never met. To believers in Mu, these parallels were not accidents. They were signatures of a lost scientific tradition, a world order that once unified Earth under celestial law. Churchward wrote that the Naacal priests of Mu understood the science of vibration, the sacred resonance between matter and consciousness. They used harmonic frequencies to shape stone, levitate objects, and heal the body. He described them as keepers of cosmic mathematics, beings who saw energy not as a resource, but as a language. And when the great continent sank, their disciples carried fragments of this knowledge to the corners of the world. It is said that the word Mu itself lingers, transformed through dialects: Maya, Maori, Morea, Moon. All point, he claimed, to a mother root, a civilization whose memory survives only through syllables whispered by the descendants of the drowned. Modern linguists reject this as fantasy, yet coincidences persist. In Polynesian mythology, the ancestral homeland is sometimes called Hawaii, a place beneath the sea where the first ancestors dwell. In the Mayan Popol Vuh, the gods create humanity after a flood wipes out earlier races. And in the Sanskrit texts of India, the Manvantara cycles describe repeated destructions and rebirths of civilizations, overseen by divine beings from beyond the earth. Patterns repeat as if history itself breathes, expanding and contracting in the rhythm of forgetting and remembering. But if Mu existed, what destroyed it? Churchward blamed volcanic upheavals, an entire network of underground gas chambers collapsing simultaneously, turning the continent into molten ruin. To modern ears, this sounds impossible. Yet the Pacific is ringed by fire, its rim fractured by fault lines that still shudder beneath the ocean. Ancient coral terraces on the islands of Tonga and Fiji show abrupt uplifts, land once submerged thrust upward by cataclysmic force. Scientists date some of these changes to around 12,000 years ago, precisely when myths across the world recall a deluge. Could this convergence between geology and myth hint at something more than coincidence? Oceanographers speak of plate tectonics and subduction zones, of islands born and buried in endless cycles. But none of these mechanisms explain the collective amnesia, the way humanity seems to have restarted around the same epoch, as if recovering from a global trauma. Archaeologists can trace tools and settlements, but they cannot explain why cultures separated by oceans began agriculture, writing, and architecture almost simultaneously around 5,000 years ago. What if that synchronization is not progress, but remembrance, a slow reawakening of knowledge once possessed, then lost? The French scholar René Guénon wrote that all civilizations are the decaying shadows of a primordial truth, what he called the primordial tradition. To him, Mu was not a place but a state of consciousness, an age when humanity and the cosmos were still one. In this view, the sinking of Mu was an inner fall, the descent from unity into separation, from cosmic awareness into historical time. The flood becomes a metaphor for the drowning of memory itself. Still, there are stones that refuse to fit the metaphor. On Pohnpei, the ruins of Nan Madol rise directly from the sea, a city built of basalt columns stacked with mathematical precision. Some weigh more than 50 tons, yet their origin quarries lie miles away. The islanders' legends say the city was constructed by two brothers who flew the stones through the air. Mainstream archaeology dates it to a millennium ago, far too recent for Mu, but the strangeness remains. Why would a culture with limited resources build a megalithic complex on tidal flats, destined to sink? Why repeat, in miniature, the story of a drowned city? The more one looks, the more echoes appear. Easter Island's statues gaze westward, toward the empty horizon where Churchward placed Mu. The petroglyphs on those statues' backs depict serpentine spirals, solar rays, and birdmen ascending to the sky, symbols identical to those on pre-Columbian ceramics in Peru. Even the underground complexes of Teotihuacan, with their mica-lined chambers reflecting electromagnetic energy, have been reinterpreted by some researchers as relics of an ancient technological understanding lost to time. Skeptics dismiss such parallels as pattern-seeking, the human urge to connect dots that were never meant to align. Yet it is this same impulse that drives discovery. Without it, no archaeologist would look twice at a stone. The difference lies only in degree. When does coincidence become correspondence? When does resemblance cross the threshold into memory? Somewhere in this uncertainty, the story of Mu breathes. It invites not belief, but attention. To the quiet resonances between myths, to the way ruins hum beneath our fingertips when we listen without arrogance. Even the idea of extraterrestrial contact, so easily mocked, may be less about aliens than about origin, about the realization that life, intelligence, and memory are cosmic by nature. Perhaps extraterrestrial is not a species, but a condition. to remember where we truly come from. In recent decades, satellite scans have revealed strange rectilinear patterns beneath the Pacific near Tonga Trench, lines that stretch for kilometers, as if marking something once organized, now buried. Natural formations, say geologists, yet their symmetry recalls the geometry of sacred architecture. Could nature alone create such precise alignment? Perhaps. But if so, what does that say about the intelligence of nature itself? The more we map the ocean floor, the more we find anomalies that defy our linear sense of time. Submerged roads near Bimini, terraces off Japan, cyclopean walls near Yonaguni, and volcanic domes hollowed like amphitheaters. Each discovery erases certainty and expands possibility. We tell ourselves that knowledge builds upward, like a pyramid, but perhaps it descends, spiraling downward through layers of forgetting until only fragments remain. If Mu truly existed, its story is not just about disappearance, but about inheritance. Its legacy might not lie in the stones it left behind, but in the memory of the stars reflected in human eyes. For even now, we feel the pull of something older, a gravity of origin that no theory of evolution or migration can satisfy. The desire to know where we began is the deepest current in the ocean of consciousness. And somewhere beneath that current, deeper than the trenches and darker than myth, something ancient waits, not to be proven, but to be remembered. If memory could be measured in stone, perhaps the truth of Mu would already be known. But memory is fluid, like the ocean itself, shifting, eroding, reshaping until even the most enduring myths dissolve into silt. Still, every few decades, something stirs the waters again. An artifact, a pattern, a discovery that makes the boundaries between legend and history shimmer uncertainly. And each time, humanity is forced to look once more into the abyss beneath its feet, wondering whether the earth remembers more than we do. In 1968, off the coast of the Bahamas, divers reported a strange formation near Bimini Island. Massive limestone blocks arranged in near-perfect alignment, stretching hundreds of meters underwater. Known now as the Bimini Road, it immediately ignited theories of a sunken civilization. Some saw it as a natural beach rock formation fractured by tidal forces. Others, including proponents of lost continents, believed it was the last visible remnant of Atlantis or Mu. The structure's precision, its right angles and jointed seams, suggested something crafted, something designed. Even after geological studies claimed to demystify it, the impression lingered. A human instinct that geometry is rarely an accident. What drives us to search for origins beneath the waves? Perhaps it is because the sea is the perfect vessel for secrets. It swallows time indiscriminately, erasing borders between the plausible and the impossible. Beneath the Mariana Trench, tectonic plates grind like the gears of forgotten machines. The ocean floor records every pulse of catastrophe, yet speaks in languages we have not learned to read. Every fossilized reef, every buried ridge may carry the memory of a world that stood above water before the continents took their current form. And yet, the moment science looks for certainty, the ocean changes its face again. There are older mysteries still. In 1872, Augustus Le Plongeon, a photographer and amateur archaeologist, excavated Yucatan and translated Mayan inscriptions that he believed described a land called Mu. He was convinced that the ancient Maya had migrated from this motherland after it sank. His claims were dismissed, Yet his findings influenced Churchward's later writings and helped fuse Mu with the broader legend of lost Pacific civilizations. What is curious, though, is how persistent these cross-oceanic echoes are. The Maya, who lived thousands of miles from Polynesia, recorded gods descending from the sky and oceans swallowing cities, imagery nearly identical to the oral traditions of the South Seas. Skeptics argue this repetition reflects human psychology, not history. Flood myths, they say, are universal because floods are universal. Yet what if the universality itself is evidence of a shared event? Around 10,000 BCE, at the end of the last ice age, global sea levels rose by more than 120 meters. Entire land masses were submerged. Ancient shorelines vanished, and with them the settlements that once hugged those coasts. The geological record confirms this transformation was violent and sudden. What we call the memory of Mu may be the echo of that ancient drowning, the trauma of an age that watched its world sink, retold for millennia until it became myth. Still, myth has a way of preserving truths science overlooks. In 2012, marine geologists mapping the Indian Ocean near Mauritius discovered microcontinents, fragments of ancient crust buried under volcanic sediment. They named one Mauritia, a landmass that once connected India and Madagascar before sinking beneath the sea. The discovery proved that continental submergence, once dismissed as fantasy, is geologically possible. The Earth itself keeps archives of lost worlds. And if such fragments exist in the Indian Ocean, why not the Pacific, where the crust is older, deeper, more complex than anywhere else? Even in language, traces remain. Polynesian myth speaks of the land of the dawn, a realm from which wise ancestors sailed before the flood. Some of these tales mention shining towers and luminous beings who taught navigation by the stars. The parallel with Churchward's Naacal instructors is striking. It is possible, of course, that Churchward borrowed from these oral traditions, not the other way around. Yet the resonance persists. The same archetype of teachers from the sea, bearers of cosmic knowledge, builders of megaliths that align with celestial paths. And beyond the realm of myth, there are the enigmas of construction. How did the ancients move stones weighing hundreds of tons without iron tools or wheels? How did they orient monuments so precisely to the equinoxes and star risings across cultures that supposedly never met? Some researchers point to the lost science of acoustics, the manipulation of resonance to create levitation-like effects, a concept faintly echoed in Churchward's vibrational technology of Mu. In 2018, engineers analyzing the acoustic profile of Stonehenge discovered that its layout amplifies sound frequencies in ways that could not have been accidental. Similar findings emerge from the Great Pyramid, from Chavin de Huantar in Peru, from Nan Madol, sites separated by oceans, but united in their mastery of vibration and space. Could these be faint echoes of a science shared long before recorded history, a heritage of the mother civilization? Every answer seems to fold into a deeper question. If Mu existed, was it human in origin, or something more? Ancient astronaut theorists, following Churchward's hints, suggest that Mu was founded not by terrestrial beings, but by visitors from the stars. In their view, the Naacals were not priests but emissaries, guides who engineered humanity's leap from instinct to intellect. The flood that destroyed Mu, they claim, may not have been natural at all, but an act of rebalancing, a controlled reset of an experiment gone astray. This hypothesis finds eerie parallels in myth. In the Sumerian texts, the gods decide to flood the earth after humankind grows too noisy. In the Mayan Popol Vuh, the creators destroy early humans who forget their makers. The same narrative reappears again and again. The intervention, the rebellion, the deluge. If these stories preserve even a shadow of truth, they suggest that civilization is cyclical, not linear, a pattern of rise, corruption, and renewal. Mu, then, would not simply be the first civilization, but one of many, each erased to make way for the next. Modern science resists such cyclic thinking. It prefers the arrow of progress, the tidy sequence from primitive to advanced. But time itself does not move that way. Stars die and are born in the same breath. Galaxies expand and collapse in rhythms that make human history seem like a heartbeat. Could civilization follow the same cosmic pulse, each age rising from the sediments of the one before it? If so, Mu's story becomes not a myth of loss, but of recurrence, an ancient reminder that everything forgotten will one day resurface. And maybe that resurfacing has already begun. As technology grows, as our machines learn to think and our maps extend to the stars, humanity edges closer to the knowledge it once claimed to possess. Energy, vibration, consciousness, the unity of life. These were the principles said to govern Mu, and now they return under new names: quantum resonance, morphic fields, unified theory. Science, in its highest form, begins to sound like myth reborn. Perhaps that is the true meaning of Mu. Not a land to be found, but a state to be remembered. A time when knowledge and spirit were not divided, when the stars were mirrors of the soul, when creation itself was a language, and we were fluent in it. If that memory lives anywhere, it is not beneath the ocean. It is within us, buried under layers of disbelief, waiting for the tide of awareness to rise again. And so each wave that breaks against the Pacific shore may not be water alone. It may be a whisper from the past, reminding us of what we once were and what we might become again. There are places on Earth where silence feels older than the land itself, where wind, stone, and water seem to remember a language that human tongues have forgotten. In those places, one can almost believe that traces of Mu still linger, not as ruins, but as vibrations etched into the fabric of the world. The ocean moves to that rhythm, and perhaps so does the mind that listens deeply enough. In 1997, hydrophones operated by the U.S. National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration picked up a sound in the South Pacific unlike any ever recorded before. It was a low, powerful bloop, resonating through thousands of kilometers of open sea. Some speculated it was the echo of collapsing ice shelves. Others whispered that it was organic, something massive and alive beneath the abyss. For a moment, imagination outran measurement. What if the sound was not a creature, but a place? Something shifting in the deep, a movement of submerged architecture, the slow exhale of a sleeping continent. The signal faded, but the question remained. The South Pacific, Churchward's supposed site of Mu, is a cartography of enigmas. The seafloor there is fractured by ridges and plateaus that seem too deliberate, too sculpted by symmetry. The Easter Island Rise, the Tuamotu Plateau, the Ontong Java, each carries traces of once elevated lands, drowned and reshaped by tectonic violence. Yet within these geological scars, there are alignments that defy randomness. Volcanic chains forming near-perfect circles, submerged terraces echoing temple steps. linear ridges converging toward a single vanished point once near the equator. Could this be coincidence? Or does the Earth still outline the bones of something ancient? Legends from Polynesia speak of Hiva, of Vaihi, of a radiant land that sank after the wrath of the gods. The stories say survivors fled in canoes, guided by stars and memory, bringing with them fragments of sacred chants that told of creation's beginning. Those chants, when translated, describe beings of the first dawn who descended to teach language, cultivation, and the science of light. They do not sound like ordinary ancestors. In their footsteps, the people built altars of basalt, orienting them toward constellations that marked both time and migration. The same star patterns appear carved into Easter Island's tablets and mirrored in the navigation charts of Micronesia. The symmetry between sea and sky feels less like chance, more like remembering. In 2019, a team of Japanese marine geologists published a study on the submerged Yonaguni monument, long dismissed as a quirk of erosion. After 20 years of research, they concluded that while the rock formation was natural in origin, several surfaces showed signs of deliberate modification. Tool marks, chisel striations, and right-angled joins inconsistent with natural processes. To the scientific mind, such evidence demands caution. To the imaginative one, it opens a door. If a civilization had existed before the sea rose, could this be one of its last visible remnants? A monument left as warning or remembrance? The idea of Mu's extraterrestrial influence returns here, uninvited but irresistible. Churchward's Naacals were said to have come from the west. But what if that direction meant not geography, but the heavens? The Dogon tribe of Mali, half a world away, speaks of amphibious beings who descended from Sirius, teaching astronomy and language. Their knowledge of invisible star systems predates modern telescopes. Could these scattered stories, of gods from the sky, of light descending into water, be describing the same encounter, seen through the different eyes of different survivors? Perhaps the beings of Mu were not aliens in the modern sense, but intermediaries, expressions of consciousness bridging worlds. In mythic time, there is no distinction between the sky and the sea, between arrival and awakening. The descent of the gods might have been a return, the re-emergence of something that had always been here, watching from behind the veil of perception. And when that veil thinned, when knowledge became too heavy for the fragile mind of a young species, the flood came, not as punishment, but as preservation. The sea became the archive, the only vault vast enough to hold the memory of a civilization that once spanned the earth. Modern physics hints at a strange parallel. Quantum theory suggests that information cannot be destroyed, only transformed. Every thought, every vibration, every trace of existence remains somewhere in the fabric of the cosmos. Could it be that Mu, too, has not vanished but changed form, its knowledge encoded in matter, its resonance still rippling through magnetic fields and ocean currents? Perhaps what ancient priests called the language of vibration was a real technology, one that modern science is only beginning to rediscover under different names: cymatics, resonance engineering, quantum acoustics. If such a science once existed, then its monuments were not merely stone. They were instruments, tuned to the frequency of the planet itself. Archaeologists have often remarked on the acoustic design of ancient sites. The way sound behaves inside the Great Pyramid. the way certain Andean temples hum when the wind passes through them, the way Mayan staircases create the echo of a Quetzal's call. These were not coincidences. They were harmonies, evidence that ancient builders understood the world as vibration. If Mu truly was their origin, then perhaps all these echoes are fragments of the same symphony, still resonating across continents and time. And yet, as with all mysteries, the closer one looks, the more it retreats. Every clue dissolves into ambiguity. Every artifact invites contradiction. For each discovery that suggests connection, another points to coincidence. The rational mind demands proof. The intuitive one senses presence. Between them lies the fog, where history becomes dream. But there is something undeniable in the human yearning to remember. Why do myths of lost worlds endure when so many others fade? Why do they return, generation after generation, dressed in new names, Atlantis, Lemuria, Mu? Perhaps because they are not stories of the past, but of potential. They remind us that forgetting is never final, that beneath every extinction lies the possibility of renewal. If Mu was the mother of civilizations, then her children, the cultures of Earth, are still searching for her reflection. In our architecture, in our science, in our longing for the stars, we repeat her gestures without knowing why. We build pyramids to reach the sky, satellites to listen beyond it, machines to map the unseen. Every act of discovery is a reenactment of a memory older than history, the desire to return to the source. The Pacific, vast and unbroken, holds its silence well. But sometimes, when the tide is low and the water clears, one might glimpse shapes beneath the surface. Lines too straight, angles too precise, shadows that look like steps leading downward. They vanish again with the waves. But for a moment, imagination and memory align. And perhaps, in that fragile alignment, the truth of Mu still breathes, not as proof carved in stone, but as an echo in the mind, a whisper reminding us that the world has died before and may one day be reborn from the sea again. There is a moment just before dawn when the sea and the sky become indistinguishable, when light, memory, and reflection dissolve into one another. Perhaps that is where Mu exists now. Not beneath the waves, but in that space between knowing and remembering, between the physical and the mythical. Every civilization that has looked toward the horizon has carried, somewhere within its myths, a longing for return, to a homeland lost not in geography, but in consciousness. By the mid-20th century, Mu had become a ghost in academia, a relic of pseudoscience, relegated to the margins of archaeology. Churchward's books were dismissed as fantasy, his Naacal tablets unverified, his Pacific Empire relegated to the same shelf as Atlantis. Yet outside the walls of scholarship, the story continued to breathe. In esoteric circles, in secret societies, in whispered teachings of metaphysics, Mu endured, not as a continent, but as a symbol. It represented an age when spirit and science were one, when humanity understood its kinship with the cosmos. And perhaps, like all myths that refuse to die, it endures because it carries a seed of truth. In the 1970s, explorers using sonar mapping began to uncover anomalies across the Pacific Basin. Flat-topped seamounts known as guyots, arranged in curious linear patterns. Their structure suggested they had once been above sea level before subsiding thousands of meters. Oceanographers explained them as volcanic remnants shaped by plate movement, yet their distribution formed geometric paths, like the broken spine of a continent that had fallen into the sea. For believers in Mu, it was vindication. For skeptics, coincidence. Still, as technology advanced, so did the questions. Satellite imaging has since revealed networks of submerged ridges and terraces across the Pacific and Indian Oceans. Each new scan blurs the boundary between natural formation and possible architecture. When viewed on a global map, the alignment of ancient sacred sites, the pyramids of Giza, the ruins of Nan Madol, the Moai of Easter Island, and the temples of Angkor, form nearly perfect geodesic patterns around the planet. Coincidence again, perhaps. Yet the mind hesitates. Why would human beings separated by oceans build monuments that mirror the geometry of the Earth itself? Unless, somewhere in our forgotten past, there was a blueprint, a map drawn not by explorers, but by inheritors. Even modern cosmology, in its own way, echoes the myth. Physicists now speak of memory embedded in the quantum field, of information that never disappears, of universes that cycle through birth and collapse. The same rhythm that ancient myths described as floods and renewals may be written into the fabric of existence. The cataclysm that drowned Mu could simply be the Earth's expression of that eternal pulse, a planetary breath, an exhalation of time itself. And if humanity, too, is part of that rhythm, then our progress may not be linear at all. Perhaps every leap forward is not discovery, but remembrance. The surge of artificial intelligence, the pursuit of unified field theories, the rediscovery of vibration as the core of physical law. All these could be fragments of the same knowledge once held in Mu, returning through different languages. If so, what we call the future may, in truth, be the resurfacing of a world long submerged. But what of the beings said to have guided Mu, the luminous instructors from the stars? If they were real, where did they go? Some traditions suggest they never left. The Hopi speak of kachinas, spirits who dwell in invisible realms, watching until humanity is ready to walk beside them again. In Polynesia, ancestral gods are said to live beneath the sea, emerging only when the world forgets their lessons. In Hindu cosmology, the cycles of yugas describe ages of ascending and descending consciousness, repeating endlessly. If those cycles are true, perhaps we are again approaching the edge of remembrance, the rising tide of an ancient knowing. There are clues hidden even in our biology. The human genome carries fragments of unknown origin, sequences that appear abruptly in evolutionary history with no clear precedent. Some scientists attribute this to horizontal gene transfer. Others admit mystery. The leap from primitive hominids to symbolic thinkers was astonishingly fast. Could it have been catalyzed by an encounter, an infusion of intelligence from beyond? If so, Mu might represent not a lost land, but a stage in that transformation, when humanity first became self-aware under the tutelage of something greater. Such thoughts unsettle because they blur the line between myth and identity. If we are the descendants of a forgotten civilization, then our amnesia is not merely cultural, it is existential. To remember Mu would mean to remember ourselves not as isolated creatures crawling out of chaos, but as participants in a cosmic continuum. That realization would dissolve every border we have drawn, between nations, species, even between matter and mind. Perhaps that is why the story of Mu remains veiled, because to recall it fully would change everything. And yet fragments slip through. The hum of sacred sites, the recurrence of the same symbols, the strange dreams of oceans and light that so many people report, as if recalling another life. In the quiet hours before sleep, the subconscious drifts toward patterns older than civilization. Sometimes, in that stillness, we feel a tug, a gravity not of the earth, but of memory. It draws us toward something vast, something familiar, as though the soul recognizes an ancient shoreline just beyond the visible world. Maybe that is what Mu has always been, the collective memory of humanity's first awakening, preserved in the pulse of the planet and the language of the sea. We search for it with sonar and satellites, but it waits in silence, reflected in the structure of our myths, the architecture of our minds, and the longing that drives every question we ask about where we came from. The ocean keeps its secrets well. Beneath its surface lie the archives of every extinction, every rebirth. But sometimes when the moon draws the tide low enough, one can almost hear a resonance rising from the deep, a tone so ancient it feels like the heartbeat of the world itself. It does not call us backward, but inward, toward the memory we buried when we learned to forget. And so the story closes, not with proof, but with stillness. The image of a continent asleep beneath the Pacific becomes a mirror, showing us what we have lost and what we might yet recover. Perhaps Mu is not gone at all, perhaps it survives in the quiet between thoughts, in the light that shimmers on the surface of the sea, in the pulse that moves through every living thing. Like all myths, it asks for no belief, only remembrance. For if history is the surface of time, then myth is its ocean, and we are the waves still tracing the memory of a vanished shore. And when dawn finally breaks, and the horizon divides again into sea and sky, the question remains, waiting softly beneath the breath of the world. Who were we before we forgot?